Welcome back to the Driven by Us podcast, where we talk to some of the most interesting voices in the automotive and motorsport space. Today we are joined by another very incredible guest. We have Senior Impact Manager at Mission 44, Steph Travers. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, thank you for being here. Now we're going to go straight into your life, your background, everything. So do you want to tell us a bit about your background and how you got to the position that you're in now?
Sure. So I am a chemical engineer by trade, studied chemical engineering at university before entering into the motorsport sector as a trackside fluid engineer. I went through a crazy application process to get that. So I was up against 7,000 other applicants for that role. I had to do all things from psychometric tests to flying out to Malaysia to complete a case study interview and having a treasure hunt across the city centre of Malaysia to find the CEO, and had my final interview with him before getting the role. I worked in F1 with the Mercedes team for 3 years before transitioning out of F1 into Extreme E and Lewis's wider ecosystem. So I work on Mission 44 at the moment, as you mentioned, which is a charitable foundation that was set up by Lewis Hamilton. And alongside that, when I first left the motorsport sector, he owned a team in Extreme E called X44, where I started off as associate sporting director and then was promoted to deputy team principal. So I've done a fair bit.
Yeah, I was going to say you've covered all of your bases there, but I am going to go slightly back to the scavenger hunt because, I mean, we'll go into obviously the important bits in a minute, but scavenger hunt, what does that entail? What does that teach them about you? What was the purpose of said scavenger hunt?
Yeah, it was really, it was so hard to think about it in the moment that it happened. So when I found out the morning of the scavenger hunt happening. We arrived at the Petronas offices and they were like, okay, you're going to follow some clues that will lead you to another clue. And then eventually you'll get to the CEO and you have to find him in a 45-minute period to have your final interview. If you don't find him, you're not going to have the interview.
Oh, wow.
Thankfully, all three of us found him, but it was that intense. So at this point, I'm like, okay, is it within this building? They're like, no, it's around Kuala Lumpur. So I was like, right, I have no Wi-Fi. Thank God I've done some exploring over the last few days. And there were 3 clues. So the first one took me from the offices to the Twin Towers in KL. And then from there, I was taken to the Mandarin Oriental. So the clues were all F1 based clues.
I was going to say, were they sort of engineering based or like at least F1 based clues? Okay.
Yeah, all F1 based clues. The technical engineering questions we had done the day before in the case study interview, and that's how they whittled us down to the final 3. And then this was generic fun F1 questions that led you to the CEO for the final interview.
Oh, wow. That's intense.
It was.
I don't think I've ever heard of a job interview that sends you around a city hunting for your interview, but that's definitely one way of doing it. So how did you get to that point? You said there were 7,000 other applicants. What was the process of that? How did you get there? How did you end up in Kuala Lumpur?
Yeah, I applied on LinkedIn. I saw the post on LinkedIn. They were looking for a trackside fluid engineer, and it was a global search. Saw it, decided that I was going to apply, and then had a few hiccups along the way, in a sense that I didn't realise it was a global search when I first applied. So yeah, the scale of it got to me after a period of time. Once I got the first email telling me that I'd got through, and I now needed to do a set of tests, I was so excited. Completed those tests, then needed to do a 1-minute video that was going on YouTube, and the world as well as Petronas internally were going to be voting on whether I would make it through to the next stage. And that's the moment where I was like, maybe this isn't for me and I need to rethink this. But it was always a dream for me to work in F1. So it was really difficult for me to just not submit a video. I'm such an introverted person, and it was just a scary thought thinking of answering 3 questions within a minute, and that needs to live on YouTube for people to vote. And I just thought, I'm not a popular person anyway. I've got such a small friendship group, so what am I doing this for? I'm not going to win. Literally. But the whole community came together. My parents did a lot of outreach. The Zimbabwean community came together and voted for me. And then I don't know how many votes I got internally, but I made it through to the final 5 and ended up in Malaysia. So it was just an amazing experience overall. And it really just showed me that sometimes you have to face things that you don't really want to face to get to where you want to be. And it is just helped me pave the way into such an amazing career within the motorsport sector, just getting over that initial fear. And then from there, I went to Kuala Lumpur, did a really detailed engineering interview that lasted a few hours, and you had 15 minutes of questioning after the 2 hours of preparation. But I found that the easiest part because it's what I knew,
it's what you studied.
It was the unfamiliar parts that I really struggled with.
Do you think that you not knowing it was a global search actually helped you in the sort of initial bit? Because obviously you said you're quite an introverted person. I can imagine sort of seeing that on LinkedIn, it being global search, you're more inclined to be like, you know what, actually, never mind. But actually you not knowing then gave you that sort of push, I guess.
100%. I think I only realised really the magnitude of it when I got towards KL and they mentioned how many people that had applied and the number of people when they mentioned the number of people that had applied and the 10 of us that were left for that video stage, I then realised, oh my goodness, I don't know what I've got myself into. But then as I kept going through the stages and I kept making it through, I started getting confidence in myself. But I was the only female that made it into the final 5. There were 2 of us in the top 10, but the final 5, I was the only female that was flown out to KL. And that was a challenge in itself. After coming out of the case study interview, a lot of the guys that were there came out so confident. Yeah. And they felt, oh my gosh, I did really well. I know I'm making it through to the next stage. Whereas I felt like, oh, okay, maybe it didn't go as well because I got one question at the end of my presentation. Is that because I was so bad, or is it because that I answered what they wanted to hear? And it turns out that I had answered everything and thought about more things beyond just what they had asked on the piece of paper, because I knew I needed to do something different to everyone else. So yeah, there was a lot of self-doubt in that process. I sat down for breakfast after the case study interview. We had a breakfast where they were announcing the final 3. It was meant to be 2, but they ended up with 3. And I was still eating when they started. They called up the 4 guys and they put 2 of them on one side of I think it was the CTO that was doing this, and the other 2 on the other side. So immediately at that point, I grabbed my phone and I texted my mum and dad and I said, guys, I'm so sorry I've disappointed you. I've come 5th in this because I'm still sat down. They've got the 2 groups. Exactly. And then he starts and he's like, I know you're still eating, but that's okay. I've got everyone up here, but the reason why you're not up here is because you were the top scorer within the case study interview. And we really struggled to determine who was going to join you. We couldn't whittle it down to 2. So we're taking through 3 as 2 of the others have scored very similarly. And then he said to me, which 2 do you think are going through? I was like, I can't answer that. That's not my remit. I was not in their presentations. And then they finally made the announcement. So yeah, it taught me a lot, that process. It taught me a lot in terms of imposter syndrome, believing in myself, and really just believing that you have a space within these rooms. It starts from there.
Yeah. Do you think to some extent that your self-doubt would have come across as humility as well, like rather than just you, because obviously you clearly had the skills and knowledge, like they saw that in you from you literally telling them everything they need to know? And that, do you think you not coming out being like, I smashed that, I'm the greatest person to have ever lived, do you think that also to some extent did help you throughout the interview process? Or do you think it would have been better for you to have that level of not necessarily arrogance but overconfidence in that situation?
Yeah, I'm always on the humble side. Even now, I just think that it just takes you a long way. I don't believe in being arrogant after coming out of an interview because you don't know what they're looking for. Yeah. And everyone's got there because they've all got the qualifications, right? So I think letting your personality shine through as well in these situations pays a lot. I'm not the type of person that brags based on just my nature and my upbringing. So I like to just be me, and I don't like to say that things have gone really well. But I think that also comes from being a really harsh critic of myself.
Yeah.
So when I'm doing things, I'm always thinking of what I could have done better. So I never come out feeling fully confident,
Yeah.
even if things have gone well. I would never say it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was someone that we interviewed before that said that sometimes like perfectionism can be the enemy of good. It is that thing where you're, and I had a similar thing sort of throughout my schooling where I was like, yeah, okay, I got 47 out of 48, but what was the extra mark?
Mm-hmm.
Where can I get it? What do I need to learn? What do I need to remember? And I was saying, but you got the A star, or you got the
Mm-hmm.
whatever it was. And it's like, yes, but I got 47 out of 48. What's the miscommunication here? Like, I got 40, and everyone's like, but now as an adult, I'm looking back going, that's a really decent thing I did, but that's all well and good 10 years later, I guess. But
yeah.
I think, did you find that having them sit you there while you're eating your breakfast and tell you that you're the top scorer, and did that give you that extra level of confidence, or was, again, that still something that you were like, okay, I'm top for this, but what's the next thing?
Yeah, for me in that moment, it was like, great, I'm through, but what is the next task that I need to pass so that I can get this job? Because I really want this job, right? So immediately my brain switched into gear for the next activity. However, at that point, I didn't know what it was going to be, but I was already trying to mentally prep myself and bring myself back from thinking that I'd been eliminated. So yeah, that was my focus in that moment.
How did your family react when you were like, oh, sorry, I've not got it, and then, oh, wait, actually, never mind.
Yeah.
I'm actually all good.
My dad and mum constantly through the whole process just kept saying, you truly need to believe in yourself. You've not got there because you've got there because you've got the qualifications to be there.
Yeah.
And now you need to help them understand who you are as an individual. And it's okay that you're introverted, but if you don't believe in yourself, they're not going to believe in you. So I think that was the most important thing that took me through that journey. And every time I wanted to quit, they kept reminding me that this is something that I've dreamt of doing. I've always spoken about being in F1. I had seen a lady called Lucy doing the fluid engineering role at a different team within F1 a few years before and said, that is what I want to do. Yeah. And now I've got the opportunity in front of me and I'm wanting to throw it away because I'm scared to be in front of a camera, or I'm scared to fly across the world to Malaysia. You know, I had to really just lean into the fear in that moment. And yeah, it got me somewhere in the end, but it was a really tough journey.
How long was the process from application to being offered the job?
So I applied in August of 2018. The job closed, I think it was October.
Okay.
And then I started having all the tests, etc. I was in Malaysia in December, early December, and that was for the last two stages. I found out I got the job on the ground in Malaysia. However, I was under an NDA, so I couldn't even tell my family. They allowed me to tell my parents and my sister, but I had to also tell them that it couldn't be shared wider than that. And then I had to keep it to myself until February 2019. Barcelona test, they made a formal announcement that I'd got the role. Yeah.
Wow. That must have been intense.
It was really hard, really, really intense. But I didn't tell.
Something in February. Oh, I can't because I'm busy.
It was the hardest part was actually resigning from my job at the time, because they were like, "This is strange. Like you've gone on annual leave, you've come back from annual leave, and now you're handing in your notice." And I was like, "I'm so sorry. Like I'm going to a new opportunity." They were asking questions as to what are you doing. I was like, I can't say, but it's something really cool and you'll find out soon. So it was a really difficult transition period as well in that sense, but so worth it.
I can imagine. You mentioned that you were, one of two and then the only girl. Was that the same throughout your degree as well? Or was there a sort of more proportional sort of male-female split?
Yeah, in chemical engineering, we were a few girls in my cohort. I think we were 5 or 6 actually, and that number went down after first year. But that's the nature of engineering in general, and also the nature of the motorsport sector. I've never walked into a lecture or into the paddock and have thought about being the only female. I just walk into that space knowing that this is something that I'm passionate about and it's what I want to do. So I'm embracing being there and wanting to learn, to expand upon my skills and make an impact in that way. But I think as time went on within the motorsport sector and Lewis launched the Hamilton Commission report and that sort of research, I really understood it a lot deeper. And then sometimes you just have challenges that you face when you're traveling the world and you don't really have a representative person or someone that really understands the challenges that you're going through, that you can talk these things through with. And that happened during COVID for me, when a lot of the other females within the team stopped traveling because they were within the marketing teams and the teams that weren't required to travel as part of the scaled down team function. And that's when I really, really struggled and really realized that I am one of the few, and it is a different journey to other people in the sport. And it was the moment that I really knew that I wanted to do more as well.
I think that's really interesting because obviously we talk a lot about discrepancies, like I said, in gender and race in those spaces, but it's often something you don't necessarily think about, that your lived experience day to day is your lived experience. So it's not until always someone else points out that something's different or whatever that you go, oh, I didn't realise not everyone dealt with this on a day-to-day basis. Obviously sometimes you walk in and you're like, this is quite clearly a kind of different experience, but it is interesting that it became most notable to you when, I guess, the other females were removed, for want of a better word. So obviously once you'd noticed that the experience was then different, how did you then go about sort of altering your experience, or did you just kind of accept that that's how it was going to be for the foreseeable until COVID had passed, per se?
I accepted it. And then I just, don't get me wrong, I still had people that I trusted and my close circle of friends within the sector, but there were certain things that I had to accept during that period. I didn't have the same friendship group that I had builded upon in 2019 traveling with me. So there were a few adjustments, but nothing major from my side. However, what I would say is 2020 was such a pivotal moment for me as well, when I went on the podium for the second race back after COVID. Lewis's first race win of that season, that was a momentous occasion for me and my family, and it meant a lot to me and it meant a lot to him. It was the first time that a black woman had stood on a Formula One podium. But when I was doing it, I didn't realise that. And I also didn't realise that the number of women that have ever been on a Formula One podium, or at that time, it was less than 10 women. But we've been doing this sport for 75 years now, right? At that time, I think it was around 70 years. So it took me a lot of time reflecting to realise that there's still a long way to go. But also at the same time, it was a moment that gave me a lot of hope, as I felt like I wasn't just holding a trophy at that time. I was also opening a door that wasn't open before. Not to say that the sector isn't welcoming of people from diverse backgrounds, but there was never really that representative role model for me beyond Lewis. And now I was able to be that role model for young people that were interested in engineering. And it shone a light on the fluid engineer role that people don't necessarily know about. You see a lot of the mechanics when you're watching Formula One on the TV. You don't get to see the insight into some of the other roles that are behind the scenes and are just as amazing and also contribute to the performance and success of the team. So I felt like I felt so empowered in that moment, and I never really considered myself as a role model, but having all those young girls and boys reaching out to me and parents reaching out to me, telling me how much that moment meant to them and their families, and now that their young girls and boys can see themselves in roles in the motorsport sector, that meant a lot to me. And I knew that I could do more. And when Mission 44 was set up, I knew from the onset that I wanted to be involved in it, as that was a way of doing more as well and giving back to the community.
Yeah, I think that was definitely like a pivotal moment. Like I remember that moment. I was in my early 20s, I want to say. And yeah, I remember that moment. It was a significant moment for everyone. Sort of similarly to you, I grew up, Lewis was the only person that looked like me in that sport. And our grandparents are from the same island, which is wild. But I think, yeah, seeing you on that podium was a real moment. I think not just, like I said, not just for younger people, but people our age as well that grew up looking for that, to then have that. It's like, okay, well, that may not be me, because I'm past the point of looking to, I'm never going to be an engineer. That was done a long time ago. But I think you've not only inspired the younger generation, but also reignited that passion among like our generation as well. So
thank you
for that. What was the sort of aftermath of that for you? Like, obviously you said that you wanted to be involved with Mission 44, but in terms of like your passions and the people around you, like what was that like?
It was an intense period afterwards, honestly. It was insane. I didn't know it was going to happen.
Okay.
And my dad predicted it.
Wow.
So the night before he said, you like to just have your hair up, you don't wear makeup to go to the track. I was like, do you know what time I have to get up at? Like, I'm not thinking about makeup. There's not one day that you'll see me working in F1 with makeup. But he told me, please, if you're going to do one thing, like wash and blow dry your hair tonight, because if Lewis wins the race tomorrow, you're going to be on the podium. Wow. And I was like, Dad, you're really making this up. And he said, no, I have a really strong feeling that it's going to happen. So I got to the track. I went about my day as normal. I'm hanging off the pit wall, celebrating him coming across the line in first. And I get tapped by someone in the team telling me that I'm selected to go on the podium. My initial response was, no, I'm not going to do it. It's not me. It's not me. But they were insistent that it's going to be me. They said, yep, it is you. So I just embraced it, went up, and I said, I don't even know how to spray champagne. Like, I barely drink alcohol. Like, what do I need to do? Like, tell me what happens. And he said, just look at Lewis, you'll be fine. I was like, great, that's so helpful. So I went up, they took my badge, my name, my position. I then was on the podium. I didn't even have an opportunity to text my parents, but my family loves Formula One, so they were all watching. And it just hit me like a ton of waves after that point. I got back to the Petronas lab and looked at my phone, and I couldn't even scroll through the number of messages I had on social media, on messages from my family, LinkedIn.
So, I told you so text.
Literally, I told you so text, and the video from my sister showing them crying and really just so happy. So that moment it just was a domino effect from then on, of young people reaching out to me on social media and LinkedIn, asking for mentorship, asking for advice, and asking what they should do at university or what they should do in school. And I always say that, yes, I've inspired you, but what is it that you want to do? Figuring out your passion point is so important. I could have gone the mechanical engineering route. It would have been easier for me to get into F1. Yeah. But when I looked at the degree pathways, I preferred the chemical engineering course. And I thought, F1's so competitive. What if I don't make it into F1? Am I going to enjoy working as a mechanical engineer? And when I really weighed up everything, I just thought that chemical engineering provided me with more opportunities. And that's why I pursued that, not thinking about the full end goal of getting into F1. I knew it could get me there. But ultimately, for me, it's about what I wanted to do and what I loved doing. As you spend so much of your time working, you need to ensure that you're pursuing something that you love. So yeah, I then embraced some mentorship. I mentored a few young people in that period, but then I realized that I also don't have the time to do that for everyone. And then I left F1 a few years later, worked within Mission 44 and X44, and have had a lot more engagement with young people since, and still mentor a few to this day.
What was that decision like? So obviously you said after that moment you realised that you wanted to give back more, you wanted to do more. What was sort of your final decision to be like, no, actually I'm going to leave and this is the transition I'm going to make?
I think for me, the final decision was, I was the senior trackside fluid engineer when I left. And for me to then progress within the role, I needed to go back to the factory and go into research and look at fluid development. However, I wanted to be within like the F1 ecosystem, being involved in the performance of the car on a race weekend, being in the heat of the action. So that was partly one thing, I'd say that was one thing that really sparked the move. But then also in addition, when Lewis bought into Extreme E and had X44, I was so fascinated by that series. The fact that you had a male and a female driver, and it was all about gender parity and also providing opportunities for people that don't necessarily have the opportunity to enter into the motorsport sector. I knew that it was something that I wanted to give back into. So when he asked me to go to Senegal and see if I'd like it, I jumped at the opportunity. It was an off week from F1. I had nothing better to do at home, so I headed out to Senegal and just shadowed the team in Senegal that year. After coming back, I had loved it. It's different to F1. It's not as glamorous, but I just felt like it was such a great platform for me to be able to learn. And it really actually all stemmed from a conversation that I had with Lewis Trackside. He had seen me do an interview where I mentioned wanting to go and do my MBA and quizzed me on why I wanted to do an MBA. So I explained to him, I want to go into the motorsport sector and climb up in the motorsport sector, and hopefully become a team principal in F1 one day. Just something that I really want to do, but I recognize that on the path that I'm on, it might be a lot harder for me to do it as I'm an engineer and I don't know everything. And I don't have experience in things beyond engineering. And that was the moment that he committed to help me in gaining all of those things as well. So, yeah, it was a combination of a few different things behind the scenes that led me into X44 as well as Mission 44.
It's a very, interesting path. I think not necessarily the most conventional path, but I think definitely one of the more interesting ones. So, obviously, you've gone from the very sort of intense sort of F1 running around position. What's your day-to-day like now in your role? So obviously you're senior impact manager. What does that mean and what does your day-to-day look like?
So at Mission 44 as Senior Impact Manager, I'm looking at our motorsport engagement strategy, as well as the race activations that we do. So at certain races throughout the year, we invite We at certain my goodness. At certain races throughout the year, we invite around 50 young people to different races. We bring them in so that they can do STEM activities, but also we help them understand the careers that are behind the scenes in the motorsport sector. So it's really about trying to improve their understanding of what's possible and what types of roles are available behind the scenes, and hopefully inspiring them to pursue STEM as a pathway with throughout high school and university to land a role within the motorsport sector. But on the motorsport engagement piece, I really am looking at convening of the motorsport sector. How can I bring together all the different teams and suppliers into motorsport, as well as the wider STEM sector? How can I convene them together to understand the barriers that young people from underrepresented backgrounds are facing in entering into those sectors and try and get us to make some change? So, yeah. Just at the start of baking out the strategy right now, and we'll see where I go with it. But in Silverstone this year, we had a convening. It was the second convening we've had at Silverstone, where we really have been digging into the barriers that young people from underrepresented backgrounds face in entering into the motorsport sector. We had lots of teams that were in attendance, listening to the young people and hearing from them. And I think that's the most important part of this, is really going to young people who are struggling and finding out from them, what is it that you need? What is it that you're struggling with, so that we can try and help bring more people from diverse backgrounds into the motorsport sector.
So what is the process, I guess? So you speak to young people and they say, we're struggling with X, Y, and Z. What's the process for you from there to go, okay, from this issue, this is how we're going to attempt to manage it, to putting it in place, basically?
Yeah, I'll take us back a little bit. So at Mission 44, before we expand into any new region, we always go in and do a landscape research.
Okay.
So for instance, in the UK, there was extensive research done through the Hamilton Commission report. But since we've expanded to Italy, to the US and Brazil, in each of those locations, we've done a landscape research with a consultant that has looked at everything from barriers that young people face to what opportunities are there within the STEM sector or motorsport sector if it's relevant to that particular location. How can young people get into those pathways? And then we do in-depth studies with young people and polling with young people to understand the barriers that they face in entering into those sectors, and really try and understand from a non-profit lens what non-profits in those local ecosystems need in order to succeed. So I think that's the starting point of any impact work that we do. And then as I build out the motorsport engagement strategy and convening strategy, I'm really looking at how can I connect young people with roles within the STEM and motorsport sector, and how can we as a sector come together to ensure that we're diversifying our talent pool as well. And that comes from a gender lens, ethnic lens. There's so many different lenses that you can look at it from, but really and truly what we're after is change. But we recognize that change isn't going to happen overnight, and it's going to take time. So just trying to take a step at a time and try and understand the issues that we can then contribute to helping solve.
This is potentially a sort of intense and quite large, maybe hypothetical question, but how do you measure impact? So obviously you put together all of these pieces, all these structures, all of these sort of activations and programs, but how do you measure impact as a concept?
So it varies. It depends on what we're doing. So within Mission 44, we've got a monitoring and evaluation department who are working with us, whether it's from a fundraising perspective, an impact perspective. When we're working with grantees, like, we really determine what the impact metrics are for every stream of work that we're doing. And it's based on that research, it's based on the discussions that you're having. But if I'm giving a grant to a specific organization, I also need to understand what they need, what do they need this grant for, and then we work out impact metrics surrounding that and objectives that need to be the objectives for the grant, right? But I really think when it comes to races specifically, we're looking at the number of young people that we can inspire to pursue STEM, the number of young people that can increase their knowledge on the types of careers that are behind the scenes in the motorsport sector. And year on year, when we go back to these locations, like in Austin, last year we had 2 students that came the year before that advised us that they changed their degree path and they're now going down the STEM route when they weren't considering STEM at all. So little things like that happen, but we're constantly looking at ways to evaluate and iterate programs that we're doing to make them better. And it's always the young people that are in the heart of the things that we do surrounding races and the race activations.
I find that really interesting. I just think because obviously we talk about change, but obviously you can look at like GCSEs, A to C, you can look at all sorts of things. But yeah, I just find it really interesting working out like how, I guess, each program measures impact. I think it's one of those things as well that you can often see it, I think, as well, even if you weren't necessarily looking at the numbers. We sort of found that when we were at Silverstone last year, like chatting to different people, there are significantly more, especially women of colour, that were coming up and being like, I saw this person, I've spoken to this person, I've done this, I've applied for work experience here. And I'm like, you're 12.
Yeah.
Like at 12, I didn't know what GCSEs I was going to take. And then these people going, yeah, I've already contacted a Formula student team. I've already contacted my local. I'm like, wow. Like, it really is sort of trickling down to younger age groups that are looking at, their wider career prospects, which is crazy.
Which is great because when, like, for me, when I was in school, I had to hunt for this information, right? 100%. So it's come a long way in itself, in a sense that careers departments now know about F1 a lot more, and organizations like Driven by Us and the community that has been built through Driven by Us are now getting to understand more roles within the motorsport sector. They're getting pointed to opportunities within the motorsport sector. They're getting invited to things like Silverstone, to Formula E, and are really exposing young people to opportunities that I wish I had the opportunity to attend to at a young age. And then I also think that there's so many more apprenticeships that are existing, and they didn't exist when I was in school. I would have gone down the apprenticeship route, honestly. you get that hands-on experience whilst getting qualified at the same time. And you can't beat it. Honestly, if you're able to get an apprenticeship at 16 with a Formula One team, you're going to be learning everything on the job, but at the same time you're getting that qualification, and you're not getting the debt that you get from university, you know. So I just think that there's so many options, and it's just great that we've got more apprenticeships available, because university is not for everyone. Not everybody is academic. Some people learn by doing the actual job. So I think now we're definitely catering for more young people, and it's just a case of trying to attract more talent. It's hard as well. The motorsport sector is based in Motor Valley. It's not in London. It's not in areas that have a lot of young people from underrepresented backgrounds. So there's a lot to expect of a young person that's wanting to enter into the motorsport sector. They're going to have to relocate eventually if they want to work for an F1 team. So there's so many things to consider. But I do think that a lot more has been done recently that is opening the eyes of many more young people and really attracting them into the sector.
Do you find that, I guess, geographical location and access is like a common theme that comes up among the people you speak to?
Definitely is. It is a common theme. A lot of young people are still living with family, and to have to relocate, it's not easy. Some of these young people in some of the locations we're in can't even afford to go to university, so are looking for scholarships and alternate routes. So to then think about having to uplift themselves and move to a new location, and essentially their family now has to run their household at home, but also support this young person who's moving to work in the motorsport sector. It's a lot to ask of families, but there's definitely more appetite for it in more recent years. And don't get me wrong, like, depending on what role you're in, the motorsport sector does pay pretty well, but still having to move to a new place it's tough.
Big adjustment.
It's a really big adjustment when you're doing that on your own and you're having to set yourself up from the ground up. It's hard mentally, not just financially, you know.
Was engineering always the goal for you? We've spoken about sort of young people. I said even as young as 11, 12. Was that always what you sort of saw yourself doing at that age, or did you not really?
I was exposed to engineering from a really young age. So I was born in Zimbabwe. Both my dad and my grandpa had engineering workshops. So after school, I would go into the workshop by my dad, and instead of being in the room doing my homework, I'd want to sneak in and see what was going on. So there was definitely a love for engineering from a young age. And there was a love for cars. I used to love fixing cars. I used to love being in cars and like going really fast. I would always encourage my dad to drive fast, and he was like, no, there's speed limits. But at that point, it was the thrill for me, right? But I was torn growing up. I was torn between engineering and medicine. I wanted to be an OBGYN, or so I thought. And then my mum encouraged me to do work experience at 16. I went and did work experience in a hospital in the UK. And I hated it. I really do take my hat off to doctors. It was the moment that I realized how squeamish I was.
Yeah.
And I just knew that it wasn't for me. It was not for me. And so I started exploring engineering even more. And that was the moment that I really knew that I wasn't torn between the two. It was engineering. So I then decided to look at mechanical, chemical, aeronautical, and just make the decision of which path of engineering I wanted to take. So it was there, but wasn't the leading career path for me when I was growing up.
I think that's actually quite a good bit of advice, like sort of that your mum's giving you there, because I sort of did a similar thing where I was like, I definitely want to do this, and then spent 3 days doing it, and I was like, I definitely don't want to do this. And I think it's something like medicine, if you're going to commit 5 years of your life to studying on top of everything else, that's a pretty big commitment, and to get in the first place as well. So
yeah,
I guess kind of going off of that topic as well, what is something in your life that, looking back, you kind of built like a large amount of resilience, or at least that you had to overcome? Like something you had to overcome that was a significant sort of, not necessarily setback, but roadblock, I guess.
Really good question. I think for me, it would be going back to year 13. I was wanting to send off my UCAS application for engineering, and the school didn't want to send it.
Wow.
They called my parents in, and they said that they don't think I'm ever going to make it as a good engineer, and I should reconsider what I wanted to study. And they gave a suggestion of a career path, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. And thankfully, I have extremely supportive parents, strict, but extremely supportive parents who fought for me and really fought for the school to send off my engineering application. When I went home that day, they said to me, it's not the end of the world. It's okay. If they don't want to send off your UCAS, it's fine. Then maybe we don't do university this year. We go to college and we send off a UCAS application next year and do engineering, or we try and submit it on our own, right? Let's look at the different processes. We've got options, but we're going to try and work with the school to get this application sent off if it is really what you want to do. So we had that discussion. I was like, no, it is what I want to do. They knew that, but they wanted to make sure at that point. And eventually, I don't know what meetings my parents had with the school. They sent off my application. I was accepted by 4 out of the 5 universities that I had applied to, which just shows like you really need to have a strong support system helping you through. But it also showed that I was more than capable to go and do engineering. And I wish I could go back and see that teacher today, or I hope that they've been able to see what I've achieved. I hope so, but you never know. But it's just to say that I don't want to say anything to them apart from the fact that that moment could have shattered me.
Absolutely.
And I hope that there were not many other young people that experienced that from that teacher, or any young people, to be honest. I hope that young people don't experience that, but the reality is that they do. I just wish I could go back to her and say, like, if I didn't have that strong support system, that would have really altered my career trajectory and maybe even altered what I applied to university for, despite knowing that it was really what I wanted to do, you know? So just think about how you interact with young people, as at that point, they're making decisions that affect them for the rest of their lives, right? And you can either support them in the right way or give them advice that could deter them from really pursuing something that they're passionate about and that they want to do, you know? It's not that I didn't have the grades to go and do engineering, right? If I didn't, then that's a different conversation. So yeah, I think having teachers that believe in you as well is so important, or at least teachers that don't put you down and make you lack self-belief. I think is the moment that really sticks with me even to this day now.
It's quite a common story, do you find, though, that a lot of people look back and there was a person, whether it be a teacher, a parent or someone else, that said this isn't right for you, you're not supposed to do it. And I think, like I said, to some extent there is a sort of common sense element. So if you were applying with 3 E's and a U, for example, applying for Oxford or Cambridge, that's again slightly different conversation. Things need to be discussed about improving grades, but I think there is something to be said about allowing kids to fail and allowing them to try things. When you are 17, 18, trying to pick what you want to do for the rest of your life, that's a big decision. And if you think you know what you want to do, there's nothing inherently wrong with trying it.
Exactly.
And like I said, if you've made it through those 2 years, I remember my A-levels, like, they're intense. If you can make it through STEM subjects in there, you've committed to taking that a bit further. Like, that's a lot of work to be put in. So, yeah, I think support systems are really important. And kind of attaching to that, is there someone outside of your family that you consider to be like a mentor that's helped you throughout your career?
Going through school and university, I didn't have a mentor. I think I had people that affected my journey and encouraged me to do certain things. I had great lecturers and careers advisors at uni, but I didn't proactively have a mentor at that point in my career or in my trajectory. Once I got to working in industry, I did. So I worked in BASF on my placement year, and during that year I had a mentor that stuck with me for the last few years of university. And then going back there for my graduate role again, I had John again that mentored me through my time there. And then entering into the motorsport sector, from the moment I went in, I was welcomed with open arms by everyone on the team. However, there were certain people that I had spoken to that have really supported me on my journey. And I think one being Lewis as well, that has supported me across my career over the last few years. So I do think it's important to have mentors and to speak to people about your career and where you're going. And now I've got a coach as well that's trying to help me navigate my path and figure out what I want to do. I think it's so important to embrace these opportunities, you know. It's not something that I would have even considered maybe 3 years ago, but now I look at it and look at my coaching sessions and I think, why did I not do this sooner? Like, I'm getting so much from it. So yeah, I would encourage a lot more young people to have a mentor and to reach out to people that are in the sectors that you want to enter into. I wish I had done that beforehand. I had role models that I looked up to, but never proactively had conversations with someone that could have guided me in the right direction or given me any advice.
So we're going to take a slight detour with these next few questions. They're just a little bit out there, a little bit different. So if you were going to have a dinner party with 3 people, living or dead, doesn't matter, who would they be?
3 people living or dead, dinner party. My grandpa. So my dad's dad, he passed away when I was 3. And I've always just wondered what he's like and would love to just have a conversation with him. And he was an amazing musician as well, and my sister's definitely taken after him in the music sphere. I think beyond that, I would say Barack Obama.
Nice.
And I would say Lewis, but I have the opportunity to be with him, so I'm going to think of someone else. Actually, you know, I'd say Michelle Obama as well.
She is an icon.
She is an icon, and she's just so impressive, you know?
Ridiculously impressive.
So, yeah, I think those will be the 3.
I mean, they're solid choices. I feel like that would be a very sort of intellectual conversation, that would be.
Yeah.
What is a movie or book that inspired you when you were growing up that you think everyone should read at some point in their lifetime?
I would say Hidden Figures.
Oh, I love Hidden Figures.
I love that movie. Just seeing those 3 women being able to break barriers and, you know, just being positive disruptors, I would say, you know. It's just given me so much inspiration, that movie, all the way through, and just believing in yourself, believing in your abilities, and just knowing that you deserve a space at the table. So, yeah, it's definitely a movie I would recommend everyone to watch.
I also would recommend. It's a great film and a great book. So to round up the episode, what we do with everyone, well, 2 things. So the first one is we have a question from you from a previous guest who asked it without knowing who you were. Didn't give them any information other than you worked in motorsport in some capacity. And then we're going to ask you for a question to ask our next guest without telling you anything about them either.
Sure.
So the question that we had from the previous guest is, if you had to take 3 separate motorsport series and combine them, which 3 would you choose, and sort of how would that work?
Oh, that's a really good question.
Right.
I think I'd combine Formula 1 for the speed, precision, the engineering, World Rallycross,
right?
The jumps,
yep,
and just the fact that there's no one racing line. Like there's many. It's just
with it.
Yeah, and then E1 for the element of water.
I know. I said that.
Yeah, either E1 or like, if Extreme E still existed, I would say Extreme E. Like, they race on ice, they race in the desert, like something that will throw a different terrain and another curveball. Yeah, that's what I say.
That would be a very interesting mix. And now for your question for our next guest. They will work in motorsport or the automotive space in some capacity. And that is all the information I can give you.
Okay. I would say, as a question, if you could choose 2 Formula 1 drivers from any era and put them in the same machinery, who would you choose and why?
Oh, I like that one. That's a bit different. I feel like as well, we don't tend to tell people what the questions are until sort of this moment. And I love just ambushing people with questions.
Yeah.
Because it's that sort of thought process and just the creativity. But yeah, thank you so much for talking to us today.
Thank you
for coming on. It's been great talking to you.
Thanks for having me.